The Medici, the family that funded the Renaissance, bought the papacy, and practically invented modern banking in the backrooms of 15th century Florence. History books tell you they died out, that their line ended in the 1700s, and their power faded into museums and TV dramas. But what if I told you that's a lie? What if the Medici didn't die? They just scaled up. What if the system of control they invented, using debt to enslave kings and gold to redraw borders, never actually left? It just changed its last name. It moved from Florence to Frankfurt, then to London, then to New York. To understand who actually owns Europe today, you have to stop looking for a family crest and start looking for their blueprint. Because the blueprint is still running. And once you see it, you will realize that the wars you fought, the inflation eating your savings, and the collapse of the empires we live in were all part of the business plan. Today, we are going to trace that bloodline of money. From the Medici model to the trenches of World War I, through the invisible laws that drain your bank account, all the way to the collapse of the American empire happening right now. This isn't history. This is an autopsy of the world you live in. Let's fast forward from the Medici palaces to the mud of 1914. You know how World War I gets boiled down to that one gunshot in Sarajevo? Yeah. Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets popped, alliances kick in, and boom, millions dead in the mud. But let's apply the Medici filter. What if the real spark wasn't a bullet? It was a checkbook. A handful of bankers, the spiritual successors to those Florentine merchants, huddled in smoke-filled rooms from London to New York. They scribbled loans worth billions in today as money that turned a Balkan squabble into the bloodiest mess humanity ever cooked up. And the kicker? They funded both sides. Europe in 1914 was a powder keg. Nationalism was raging. Militaries were flexing. But peel back the propaganda posters, and you will find something way more sinister. A financial arms race that had been brewing for decades. I'm talking about empires drowning in debt from gobbling up colonies, gold standards creaking under the weight of industrial greed, and a web of secret treaties that weren't about borders. They were about bottom lines. Picture this. Britain and France, the old guard, sitting on massive colonial halls in Africa and Asia, sucking in raw materials like rubber and oil to feed their factories. But they were leveraged to the hilt. Debts from endless imperial adventures were piling up. Germany, the upstart industrial powerhouse late to the colonial party, was desperate for scraps in Morocco and the Middle East to fuel its steel mills. And pulling the strings? Not kings or kaisers, but the merchant banks of the City of London Rothschilds, Barings, Morgans lending at rates that would make a loan shark blush. By 1914, the global economy was this fragile web tied to the gold standard. Every nation's currency was backed by bullion, meaning one hiccup in trade or tariffs, and gold flowed out like blood from a wound. Imperial rivalries weren't just ego trips. They were economic lifelines. When Britain blocked German ships in the North Sea, that wasn't just Navy games. That was starving Berlin's exports to crash their banks. And here's the mind-blower we're unpacking today. These financial feuds didn't just make war inevitable. They financed it. From J.P. Morgan's $500 million lifeline to the Allies that tipped U.S. neutrality, to Germany's desperate gold grabs from its own allies. Does that sound familiar? It should. It is the exact same model as the multi-billion-dollar aid packages you see scrolling on your news ticker today regarding Ukraine, Israel, or Taiwan. Different war, same business model. But wait, did these bankers know what they were unleashing? Or was it just business? Let's look at the receipts. Imperialism wasn't some noble quest for glory. It was a cash grab. By the late 1800s, Europe's great powers had carved up Africa like a Thanksgiving turkey. Britain snagging Egypt and South Africa for cotton and gold. France digging into China for rubber. Why? Their factories were belching smoke 24/7, churning out steel rails and rifles. But they needed cheap resources to keep profits fat. But here's the rub, and it's a doozy. Building these empires wasn't cheap. Railways through jungles, forts in deserts, wars with locals who didn't fancy being colonized, all a government's dime. Which meant borrowing big from private banks. Britain, the sun never sets champ, owed billions in bonds by 1900, much of it to those 5 titans of the city. The Rothschilds with their web spanning Paris to Vienna. Barings, who had just survived their own Argentine debt fiasco. And J.P. Morgan across the pond, eyeing Europe like a kid in a candy store. These weren't public loans. They were sweetheart deals collateralized by future colonial taxes. It sounds like monopoly gone mad, right? But laugh if you want. This debt pyramid was teetering. One bad harvest in the colonies, one rebellion in India, and the whole system was one default from chaos. So, how did this tip into total war? Enter the gold standard, the invisible handcuffs. Since the 1870s, every major power pegged their currency to gold. It kept trade smooth until it didn't, because gold is finite. When tensions flared, like the 1911 Agadir crisis over Morocco, gold started fleeing. Banks jacked rates to lure it back, strangling credit for farmers and factories. Can you imagine? A Berlin baker can't get a loan because the Kaiser's yacht fleet drained the reserves. Unemployment spiked, bread riots brewed, and the fix? More colonies for more gold mines. But colonies were a zero-sum game. Grab Morocco, and France cedes borrows more from the Rothschilds to arm up. Now layer on the secrets. You think alliances were just handshakes? No, they were IOUs wrapped in classified envelopes. Take the Treaty of London in 1915. Britain, France, and Russia bribed Italy with chunks of Austria and Albania to jump ship from the Central Powers. The secret clause? A $50 million loan, plus shares of war spoils. Or the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving Ottoman lands like a pie, all hush-hush to divvy oil fields post-victory. These weren't diplomacy. They were venture capital for carnage, with banks underwriting the bonds. And if you're feeling that righteous anger bubbling, good. Because here is where the American Medici steps in. J.P. Morgan, Jr. When war erupted in 1914, America was supposed to sit it out. Wilson preached peace. But Morgan? He smelled profit. From day one, his firm became the Allies' personal shopper. $3 billion in munitions, food, and steel, all funneled through J.P. Morgan & Co. as the exclusive agent. That's over $80 billion today. A single 1915 loan gave $500 million to Britain and France. The biggest foreign bond issue ever. Why risk it? Because neutrality be damned, Morgan's partners knew a German win meant defaulted debts. By 1916, Britain was bankrolling everyone, but their credit was maxed. So Morgan lobbied Wilson hard. He whispered that an Allied collapse would tank U.S. exports. The NY Committee later grilled him on this. Turns out, these loans tied America's hands. Default on Morgan's billions meant economic Armageddon for the U.S. So in 1917, the doughboys shipped out. Not just for democracy, but to safeguard Wall Street's ledger. The war cost $208 billion total. Taxes covered peanuts. Bonds sold on patriotism, bought by grannies, and kids covered the rest. But who cashed in? The houses of Morgan and Rothschild, raking commissions while trenches filled with the poor. Versailles wasn't peace. It was a debt trap reloaded, with reparations chaining Germany to hyperinflation and Hitler's rise. That Sarajevo bullet was the catalyst. But the real battle was fought in vaults, where gold trumped glory and loans outlasted lives. But here is the terrifying part. The bankers didn't just get lucky. They didn't just stumble into unimaginable wealth. They won because they had a cheat code. A set of invisible weapons, disguised as economic laws, that they used to rig the game before it even started. Let's look at the tools of control. Weapon number 1, Gresham's Law. 3 centuries ago, when coins were made from gold and silver, rulers began mixing cheaper metals to stretch their supply. Imagine you have a shiny, heavy gold coin in your pocket. It feels real. It has value. Now, imagine the government forces you to accept a new coin. It looks the same, but it's lighter, mixed with copper. It's a rusty slug masquerading as money. What do? You hide the shiny gold coin under your mattress, and you spend the rusty slug as fast as possible. That is Gresham's Law. Bad money drives out good money. The bankers know that if they flood the system with paper, credit, and digital digits, the rusty slugs, you will spend them. You will speculate. You will take risks. Meanwhile, they are hoarding the real assets, the land, the gold, the infrastructure. They give you the slug, they keep the gold, and they wait for you to go broke spending it. Weapon number 2, the Cantillon effect. This is the most powerful tool in their arsenal. Imagine a giant champagne tower at a lavish wedding. The glasses are stacked in a pyramid. The central bank stands at the top with a massive bottle of wine. That's the new money supply. When they pour the wine, who gets wet first? The glasses at the very top. The banks, the hedge funds, the government contractors. They drink their fill before the wine ever trickles down. By the time the liquid reaches the bottom glasses, that's you, the worker, the saver. The bottle is empty, and the wine is stale. The people at the top get the money when it is fresh and valuable. They buy assets cheap. By the time the money reaches you, prices have already risen to match the new supply. You get the inflation. They get the assets. That isn't an accident. That is the design. Weapon number 3, Pareto's Principle, the 80-20th rule. In nature, 20% of the pods hold 80% of the peas. In the Medici system, they rigged it so 20% of the people hold 80% of the debt-free wealth, while the other 80% hold the debt. The law has held for centuries because it is not about policy. It is about behavior. In markets, those who understand the cheat codes multiply their wealth. Those who don't lose it slowly through inflation, taxes, and bad timing. The system doesn't reward hard work. It rewards proximity to the champagne bottle. Let's connect the dots. Gresham's Law is how they degrade your savings. The Cantillon effect is how they steal your purchasing power. Pareto's Law is the mathematical guarantee that you will lose. Together, they form the invisible foundation of modern finance. A structure so old and effective that even revolutions, wars, and crises haven't erased it. It's the Medici blueprint, but every parasite eventually kills its host. And this banking system has a casualty rate of 100%. It has destroyed 3 global superpowers in the last 500 years. And right now, in 2025, the United States is following that exact same pattern, stage by stage, decision by decision, almost like we're reading from the same script that led to catastrophe every single time before. In 1590, Spain was the richest empire on earth. They controlled half the world's gold and silver. Within 80 years, they were bankrupt. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun never set. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. In 1991, the Soviet Union was a nuclear superpower. It ceased to exist in 900 days. Not from war, but from economic implosion. 3 times. 3 superpowers. 3 complete collapses. All following the exact same sequence. And here is what should terrify you. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. As I go through these, I want you to pause and ask yourself, which stage do you think we are in right now? Drop a comment below stage 5, 6, or 7. Let's see if we all see the same cracks in the wall. Stage 1, military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere simultaneously. Britain had to defend territory on 6 continents. The Soviet Union spent 20% of its GDP on the military. Today, the United States has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We have troops in 150 countries. We're committed to defending Europe through NATO, defending Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, fighting in the Middle East, countering China, countering Russia. Our military budget is $850 billion annually, more than the next 10 countries combined. And it's not enough. We're stretched thin. Stage 2. Currency debasement. King Philip of Spain mixed copper into his silver coins to pay his bills. Britain abandoned the gold standard to pay for WWI. The Soviets printed rubles that nobody wanted. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat currency. Since 2020, we've printed over $6 trillion. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. We're not mixing copper into coins. We're just hitting print. The mechanism is different. The result is the same. Stage 3. The debt spiral. Spain defaulted 4 times in 40 years. Britain borrowed until it owed more than its GDP. The U.S. now owes $36 trillion. That's 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion per year. We are spending more on interest than on defense. We borrow to pay the interest on previous borrowing. That is the mathematical definition of a death spiral. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. Spain had all the gold in the world, so they stopped making things. Why work when you can buy? Britain's factories rusted while their bankers got rich. America doesn't make things anymore. We design, we finance, we consume. But our manufacturing base has been gutted shipped to China, Mexico, Vietnam. We import $800 billion more than we export annually. Just like Spain became dependent on imports while the silver flowed out, we are dependent on imports while dollars flow out. Stage 5. Social decay. With the economy failing, Spanish crime exploded. British society fractured. The Soviet Union saw life expectancy drop. Look around. Trust in institutions is at all-time lows. Crime is rising. Homelessness is exploding. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans annually. Political dysfunction is total. We can't agree on anything. Can't fix anything. Can't build anything. The signs of decay are everywhere, but everyone pretends it's fine. It is not fine. We are on stage 5 of 7. Stage 6 is loss of reserve currency status. That's when allies start diversifying. When trade moves to other currencies. We're seeing early signs with BRICS nations and central banks buying gold at record rates. Stage 7 is collapse, not gradual decline, sudden implosion. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost the empire in 20 years. So, does the Medici family own Europe? Not the individuals. You won't find a guy named Lorenzo sitting in Brussels giving orders. But the spirit of the Medici, the system they built? Yes, it owns Europe. It owns America. It is a system where debt is the weapon, and the banking class are the generals. It lured kings into war in 1914. It wrote the laws that transfer wealth from your savings to their stock portfolios. And it is currently driving the American empire off the same cliff that claimed Spain and Britain. The names on the door change: Medici, Rothschild, Morgan, Federal Reserve. But the ledger remains the same. They understand the rules. They know that bad money drives out good. They know the champagne tower will always fill their glasses first. And they know that when the empire finally collapses, they will just pack up their ledger and move to the next host. The question is, now that you see the blueprint, what are you going to do about it? Because the collapse isn't coming. It's here. And the only way to survive the fall is to stop playing by the rules they wrote for you and start playing by the rules they use for themselves. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, history isn't over. It's just under new management.